r/AskReddit. Mindless Beginning 36 says, people who skipped a grade in school, what was that experience like? Top 2% says, my wife skipped a grade. She says it was socially isolating, and we've agreed not to take the option if it's available with our child. Kismititaniumus says, damn man, are we married to the same woman? My wife skipped a grade in elementary school and it affected her social life up to, well, now I guess. She didn't even go to prom because everyone treated her like a little sister and no one would ask. It sucks because I have friends that I met in HS 25 years ago who I'm still close to, but she doesn't. To this day she has a really hard time making friends. Erasibo says, damn man, are we married to the same woman? Yes. Smolbabian says, I skipped first year of elementary school, so while I don't have a ton of memories of it, I know the first few months were a bit rough. I was a tall kid so didn't look physically out of place, but developmentally there's definitely a gap between a 6 and a 7 to 8 year old, so I was called a baby by some of my classmates, and teased quite a bit at the beginning. I was also still ahead of my new class in some things, but behind in others, namely handwriting. I had received very little formal education on this, and it was pretty ugly. My school and my teacher were very understanding though, and I adapted and quickly made friends. After like 6 months, no one could tell, and from what my parents I was a much happier kid than being bored and frustrated in class for 2 years before skipping a grade. There was talk of having me skip a second grade, but it wasn't as necessary and my parents didn't want me to have such a big age gap with my classmates. Theslab says, this is a second-hand account of 2 separate instances. I'm not smart. I was in college for 6 years to get a 4-year degree. My cousin skipped 2 grades. She was/is the most socially awkward person I've ever known. Her life pretty much peaked at getting into an Ivy when she was 16. It's been all downhill from there. She has a good job, but her personal/private life is a mess. No friends, married the first loser, capital L, who paid her any mind, who left her saddled with high 6-figure debt and 4 stepchildren. She has no children of her own. Guy I worked with for a little while in a warehouse. He also graduated high school and started college at 16. He said it was the worst decision he'd ever made. Had 0 friends in high school or college. Don't forget a 2-year age gap when you're still a teenager is huge. Dropped out of college and was working with me driving forklifts. He eventually went back to college in his early 30s and ended up going to medical school, albeit about a decade later than he said he would have had he followed the more traditional path. His words. Coco Almonds Rock says, I skipped my senior year of high school. Never regretted it. I'm an introvert and was not social in high school. I despised high school. I graduated early and got to have fun in college. Challenging classes, much more interesting people. Never regretted a single minute. Leroy says, not great. I wouldn't recommend it unless a kid is really bored academically. I will say there is a gendered component to this where it is probably a somewhat better idea for a girl than a boy. Academically, it was fine. But always being the youngest made things socially challenging. It makes sports very difficult, dating within grade harder, and driving later than everyone in grade was frustrating. Also, needing my mother to sign a permission slip so I could use the pool as a minor at university was embarrassing. Boo-hoo Cowboy says, I will say there is a gendered component to this where it is probably a somewhat better idea for a girl than a boy. I wouldn't be so confident in that. Social relations between girls get very complicated around middle school, and bullying can be vicious. Not being able to mature enough to fit in socially with middle school girls will leave deeper psychological scars than sucking at sports ever will. Cunicles says, I skipped kindergarten. As in, they moved me forward during the year. I didn't gain anything from it other than high standards and disappointment when you fail to meet them. In high school and college it gets weird when your friends start driving and going out to clubs. Easy fix for this one. I also wish I had that extra year to figure myself out more before entering the real world. r/AskReddit. Grace 576 says, what's the most unexpected place you've found inspiration? Riasana Blegad 6881 says, for me, it's the toilet. CTTG 121 says, blurry goal. No relationship 2114 says, the bottom of a bottle of rot good vodka. Anonymous says, downtown San Francisco. It inspired me to never do drugs. Affectionate fan 5813 says, underneath a pile of mismatched socks in the laundry room, sometimes creativity lurks in the most mundane corners of life. Joint Problems 9000 says, I had a profound moment while hanging from a rope under a black hawk. It was at that moment that I realized it might be time to find a new line of work. Creepy Present 7403 says, the DMV. Nothing makes you appreciate the freedom of creativity like being stuck in a place with zero entertainment options. Roarish says, we used to have those big armoire and I loved writing in it. It's warm, dark, smelled like leather. Speedow says, DMT. SCC says, a first date actually. I found out she was a powerlifter and that fitness played a huge role in her life. I saw right then and there how happy and confident of a person she was. Since then, I've been going to the gym 4 to 6 days a week for a solid 6 months, and she is now my fiancé. Dysphoric Otter says, watching physics videos on YouTube. Film Composer says, a horror stories of tech support type of message board thread from the late zeros. Someone mentioned that they worked for tech support in a very specific niche field that was small enough that they provided tech support for the same specific customers very often. And he noted that there were 2 customers who he worked with that he knew worked on the same team and were issued the same equipment from their company, but he rarely heard from one of them and heard from the other very often with a constant this piece of crap isn't working sort of attitude. It was an enlightening experience for the tech support rep because he knew the guy's teammate was working with the exact same equipment and almost never had issues, so it was purely a skill issue on the part of the second guy's fault, but the skill wasn't in using the equipment. The rep knew that both of them were competent and talented in their fields. It was that the second guy had a defeatist attitude and had a problem with every piece of technology because of it. It was weirdly inspiring to reevaluate the way I look at how attitude determines so much more than we admit to ourselves. The second guy added so much stress into his life by believing that every piece of equipment he received was faulty, never wondering why his coworker with the same equipment hardly ever had any issues with his. JRTTS says, myself realizing I'm stuck with my own self, so I'd rather enjoy instead of ruminate. In my darkest hour I thought, if no one is going to support me, I must be my own champion. Sounds a bit selfish or narcissistic, but helping myself is important before I can help others. Humbler Mixture 9869 says, comfort room. Oxtended 6120 says, last quarter of a 2-year music theory course. All about the weird art music of the 20th and 21st centuries that broke all the rules. Made me appreciate some aspects of the art and music world that I previously thought were trash. Tar was the best I had in any class, a true intellectual, but she was also so grounded and enthusiastic. Alternative Lime 6108 says, bottom of a liquor bottle. Peanutadet 9393 says, truck stop stall. Anklerlick says, glory hole. Upstairs teacher 5480 says, In the shower. It's like the hot water unlocks a portal to genius ideas and forgotten shampoo bottles. Bradley Worst says, Monkey S anime reviews. For some reason it helps me make ideas for short films and stories along with the willpower to write it down sometimes. Jazzababe23 says, at my mum's place. Nicole Masters 21 says, comfort room. Corey 140 says, tripping balls from either LSD or mushrooms. Alarming Guess 9470 says, browsing old photo albums at my parents' house. It's mundane, but seeing the past, it's like you remember dreams you never knew you had. It's a strange kind of nostalgia that makes you want to do something new. r/AskReddit. Remarkable Course 507 says, what's the weirdest request a customer has ever made to you while working at the mall? Jay says, I have a few stories. Woman comes in, gets a new phone, set it up, test it, works, they leave. They come back and say the phone doesn't work in the washroom. I say it's probably a dead zone. They tell me to come to the washroom with them and try it. I tell them I'm not going to the washroom with them because that's weird and b, I'm a man, I'm not following them into the women's washroom because refer to a. They insist I go to the men's washroom then and try the phone. I ask which washroom they used, like which location in the mall. They say the one that's technically underground. I say it's for sure a dead zone there, if it works everywhere else, it's working now. They tell me to go to that washroom and try and say I'm not going to molest you there. I tell them it's weird they'd say that. They will not accept the possibility it's a dead zone. I finally say I'll walk towards the washroom with it. Lo and behold, it's a dead zone. My phone doesn't work either. They finally accept it's a dead zone. Customer says their data isn't working. I check. It's working. They insist it's not. I swap out the SIM card just for good measure, check, it is indeed working. They say they can't access a certain site. I say maybe the site is down. They hand me back the phone, it's some porn site, getting an error code, but I can see the URL. I tell them the site is down, I don't know, but it's not the data. They ask me if I can help find them a similar site. I say I'm not going to help him find porn. Says to be a bro and help him. Sir. No. He leaves angry. Working at a frozen yogurt place. Customer asks if I can make them anything hot. I say this is a frozen yogurt place, no we do not serve anything hot. Asks if I can microwave his frozen yogurt, so it's like a soup. I say we don't have a microwave, but he can bring it home and do whatever he wants with it. Asks if I can make him a frozen yogurt, go to one of the other food places in the mall and ask if they'll heat it up. Tell him I can't leave, I also don't want to do that, but he can go ask if he wants. Asks if he can return the frozen yogurt if no one will heat it up. I say no, once he buys the frozen yogurt, it's his. Leaves frustrated. Customer asks if we have some random fruit to put in his frozen yogurt, let's say pears, because I don't remember. I tell him, sorry, no pears, but we have X, Y, Z fruits. He says we should have pears. Tell him I don't make the decision what fruit we have, but I'll tell the owner when I see them. Says he wants pears. I tell him there's a TNT grocery store in the mall. If he buys a pear, I'll chop it up and mix it into the frozen yogurt for him. He tells me I should go buy the pear. I say I'm not going leave and buy him a pear. He asks why not. I say I'm no longer willing to make him it, even if he brings one now. He says that's not fair. I say too bad. This is a grown man by the way, and I was like 16. Tells me I'm unreasonable. I say okay. Snipeem Snipe says, I used to manage the electronics department at a retail store. Admittedly, I'm not usually a very observant person. But I was doing some work behind the electronics counter when I noticed two guys as they came through the entrance at the other end of the store. They were both walking fast and coming right towards me. About halfway through the store, one of the guys split off and went a different direction. The other guy kept walking towards me and approached me to ask if he could look at the digital cameras that were behind the glass case. That was a normal request. I dealt with that almost daily. But the way he was talking to me was the weird part. He was clearly nervous. He seemed short of breath, had a shaky voice, and was looking around a lot. He wasn't even good at seeming interested in the cameras. He was asking questions like, is this one good at pictures? How about that one? When he pointed at one of the cameras, I acted like I couldn't open that particular glass case. Without saying the word security, I calmly radioed the security guy to ask for help. It didn't take long for the security guy to get there. Apparently he was already suspicious. I just nodded to the direction I think the other guy went. This dope was still asking me stupid questions as his friend got caught red-handed trying to pry open the glass case with iPads in it. I believe they both got. Maps Billy says, if I can take my shoes off. Made an excuse that he wanted to buy shoes for his wife and wanted to use me to compare sizes and model the shoe. Bagabble89 says, I managed a jewelry store. My employee was having an anaphylactic reaction to mushrooms. I had given her my EpiPen and called 911. She was on the ground gasping. I ran next door and asked our neighbor to watch for the paramedics and guide them to me. I came back, was kneeling next to my employee who was still struggling to breathe. She started seizing, and I grabbed my second EpiPen and gave her a second dose. As I'm giving her the second dose, a woman strolls in and asks to see a necklace in one of the displays. I don't think I looked up, but I called out I'm a little busy, and she said, oh, well, when you have a minute. The paramedics arrive, take away my employee, barely breathing. The customer is still there and says, can I see that necklace now? Floored. I was absolutely floored. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.